Happy hump day.
I don't want you to said right before we started. So today, people dependent versus system dependent real estate businesses. Whoa, it's scrolling. What's the difference, and why does it happen?
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? What's the difference between a people-dependent real estate business and a system-dependent real estate business, right? So it's not a sexy topic, but one scales and the other one doesn't. The symptoms of having a people-dependent real estate business are you have to do everything, or you're reliant on a team member to do a lot of tasks. Maybe it's an assistant or closing coordinator or what have you. And anytime they're gone or sick or want to go on vacation, it's very, very frustrating for you. But at the same time, you realize that those things happen, and how to really kind of get out of that and get into being more of a CEO of your business, right? And so for me, Jake, we have different departments at Market Maker, and some of them are still people dependent. You know what I'm talking about, and some of them aren't as much. Everything is people dependent to an extent. However, if you've got a good system in place, you rely on the manage the system instead of the people. And again, it doesn't sound sexy, but the symptoms of not having systems dependent business are pretty painful, and it allows you to it puts you at a bottleneck, really at a competitive disadvantage, because you're not going to be able to scale properly, right? And grow your business. I'll never forget listening to a good agent one time, and I've mentioned this before, talk about the top agent in our market and how many transactions they had done. And his response was, I would never want to be that busy, right? So he wasn't thinking about how to accomplish that. He was thinking about, from his own lens, like, oh my God, that would be way too much work. Well, no, you can have as many soldiers as you have generals to manage them, right? And so, in order to have an effective business, you have to have systems in place. And in the real estate business, unlike other type of organizations, for example, a franchise, right? For us as real estate agents, team leaders, even independent brokers, right? There is no really book to go off of, right? There is no operations manual, and so a lot of times we think that we're doing the right things. We get up every morning, we do the same things, just not knowing that we're doing the same things, pretty much in the same order, and we never take the time to grab it, systemize it, and really make a process out of it, and understand how that process works, why it's there, and what you need to do to change little pieces of it in order to have an impact on the outcome. Now, Jake, I've been working on the customer service side of our business for the past few weeks here. And the first thing that I realized was that the systems that we had in place had atrophied, right? From different managers, different employees. And so for me, I wanted to implement these different things into the customer experience through the customer service department. But without systems in place, there's no way for me to be like, okay, change this piece out and interject this, insert this one. And it's very frustrating for me because I'm used to just having the high level, right? Like, here's the game changing activities. Here's how I can be an agent of change. If we implement this, let's measure the outcome. But without a system in place, there's no way to be able to really know, whether or not what you're doing is working or whether or not it's having an impact. What are your thoughts?
So, just when you go to the actual symptoms of things, right? When you're looking at it, like we talked about this last night, where it was like, man, I want to live the world where it's like the daily ups and downs and lefts and rights and ups and downs and lefts and rights that happen just with business don't affect your daily mood because you have the things in place, right? Like you've got systems in place. And when I first started working with Jay Kinder, I remember it was so weird for me because I've always been people dependent in pretty much every business that I had, having been kind of small type businesses. So we had that, and he was always like if a frustrating moment happened, he'd be like, it's not the person, it's the process. I'm not mad at the person. I'm really excited to tackle fixing the process, because it's very few times is it actually a people problem, right? People problem is very easy to solve, right? Just place the person.
Yeah, it's not the easiest, but I mean, it is easier than you'd think. I mean, you either got the wrong person or you got the right person. Most people have a desire to please. You know what I mean? They want to do when they come into an organization or when they're doing a job. Most people, Anyway, yeah.
And so once you have the process in place, then and then once it's repeatable, right? Like multiple people can do it, right? Then it's just plug and play. And when you talk about the scalability of it, like this is where you see people struggle to do 25 and people coast to do 300. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is you've got a very people dependent business and a very system dependent business.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that's allowed to happen without you showing up with absolutely zero hair and like way overweight and like just stressed out to the max, or you've got things in place where it's an actual system. And it's just, for me, like I've had a lot of really good conversations with people lately. And like I've been asking, like, hey, if I hired like a super high level business consultant to come hang out with you for a week, what do you think they would say? Right? Like, I don't even have to point it out. Like, people are like, oh, they would be really disappointed with this and this and this and this and this. So they know where the struggles are, you know what I mean, in the business. But it's hard to pick on where to start, I feel like, because like we have that sometimes internally and with clients where you're like, man, like you got a lot of moving parts, or we have a lot of moving parts. Where do we put the pressure and the focus? What's the highest priority right now? And then like when you're digging in, especially, it's like, I want to put it in here and install something so I don't have to think about it again. I can just have a scoreboard and metrics to look at, and I can know if we're implementing the plan, right?
Yeah.
And the system are still in check. And it's like having a car, right? Like, you can't, if you think about it, like if you were driving a car and you didn't have a dashboard and you constantly had to be worried about the engine oil level and the temperature, and you had to take those manually every time you stopped the car or went to start the car to make sure, or like went and checked the tank of the gas, like people would not be nearly as enthralled with, like, bikes would be a lot more popular. It'd be like, dude, it's not even worth it.
If you really break that down and think about it, you ain't going to get across the country like that. I mean, you would have to literally plan to stop every couple of hours to check things. What if you didn't? Right? It could be catastrophe. You could be stranded on the side of the road. I mean, your engine temperature could go up and the engine could blow. You wouldn't even know it if you didn't have the ability to check. And the thing that's so hard in the real estate business that I was going about before is, we don't have a manual. So like, what do you check? The thing that I love about your story of not being upset with the person, but excited to tackle the system is that's personal responsibility. And too few people want to take that today, especially when they're in the real estate business. They want to just, blame something external and say, oh, well, it's that thing, or it's that's fault, or it's the market's fault, or it's the seller's fault, or it's the buyer's fault. You're not going to get anywhere doing that. And that's just the brass tacks of it. I mean, you have to look at what your skill set is, what you're trying to accomplish, and then you have to be able to objectively look at the data, right? And be like, okay, it is what it is. I don't want to see it for worse than it is. And how can I make a change and impact to influence the outcome in a different manner? When I first started, Jake, there was no lead generation platform. There was no, Google wasn't even in fashion. I mean, we had to run our own ads, right? Like to drive traffic to our website and get a lead, and they would fill out a form, and then we would call that lead. And most of the top agents who've been around for a minute, that's how they all did it too, and they still do it to some variation of some degree of that same model. And the thing is, like, as far as personal responsibility and accountability, I couldn't, call the newspaper and be like, hey, that ad delivered me bad leads, right? Like, I would change the ad, or I would talk to the people and see what they were after and try to put some new bait out there to have an impact on the outcome. And that's when you have a systems-based business, when you're looking at those numbers and you're looking at it objectively. But I want to also talk about that are involved as far as managing people. When you start to grow a real estate team, there's secretly a lot of management involved. Like, I didn't know that, right? I mean, I was in my early 20s. I wasn't prepared to manage 50-year-olds. I didn't know, necessarily. I mean, I've managed some laborers in the past. It's like, you can work right beside them and make sure that they're doing the same amount of work as you, and very quickly if they're slacking off. But how do you do it, right? How do you manage people in a way that doesn't suck for them or you, and do it in a way that you can actually effectively build a foundation that will scale and grow? Well, the way that I found was, I'll never forget, and I don't even remember where I heard it, but Michael Dell building, basically the scaffolding to his business in his dorm room in college for Dell Computers. And then UPS being a similar type of a story that someone had built, basically in college as like a paper they were delivering, right, on a business model. And then they were like, hey, this actually looks pretty good. I'm gonna go implement it, right? And so, you have to build the foundation. I think that a lot of times what happens in real estate is we're so reactive instead of proactive in our business. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's no sales, oh my God, or oh, this deal's falling apart, oh my God. And we just are always kind of just not very prioritized with what we need to be doing. And there's two separate things, and this might be 101 for a lot of agents out there, but there's working in the business, working on the business. Well, what's the difference? How much should you give to each one, right? Well, it depends on where you're at right now in your business. If you're a sole practitioner, sole proprietor, if you're the only single agent out there, well, the first thing you need to do is get a system in place for your success so that you can continually, right, be able to call your shots as far as the transactions that you're doing. And for me, the only way that I would ever consider doing that, because I hate cold calling, I hate door knocking, I hate real high rejection techniques, is through direct response marketing, where I had leads coming to me on a regular, consistent basis, right? So as those leads come to me, then the next step obviously would be for me to start to track the conversations that I have, the face-to-face that I have, the number of people I'm able to turn into a customer. And that's based over a duration of time, right? And that's the thing that a lot of agents don't look at. They want to look at things, very short term. My father always told me, I don't know if it's true or not, but the Chinese make 60-year plans, which are multi-generational. And I mean, we just need to make a year plan as an agent. And then, say I'm going to commit to X, Y, and Z for this amount of time, whatever it is, the task that you're going to continue to do, right, in order to generate business, and look at it every quarter, look at it semi-annually, look at it annually, because that's how those numbers shake out, right? I think too much today we're used to, the microwave, instant, get it now. No delayed gratification, as far as our businesses are concerned. And that's why we're increasingly, as an industry, becoming more and more dependent on portals and things of that nature, who are practicing the delayed gratification, by the way. I know, right? What? Delivering to you after they've nurtured that lead, right? Somebody who's asking a question about ops, and then people are like, oh, this works great. And they're like, oh yeah, it sure does. Now pay us a referral fee of 35%, right? We're no longer going to accept your money for the lead. Why? Well, because the agent never created a plan to get out of that model. And it's just it's a real simple formula. It's not science, rocket science. You know what I mean? It's a scientific advertising method, but it's how many people do you have coming into you? How many of those people are you turning into customers? How much did you spend for those people to come into you? And divide that by the customers that you received. That's your customer acquisition cost. Now you got a model. Now you can say, okay, I can go make another agent successful with this model. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things you can do with that. You could say, I'm going to start a coaching company with this model, right? I mean, you could just do a number of different things as far as building that part out. But if you're past that and you've got people in your business now, then it becomes really management systems that need to be in place for the different positions in your business, right?
Yes. And you sparked I had a hard time not being like, so here's the deal.
Go ahead. Jump in.
Here's the deal. So people treating their business like an actual business, right? So if you wanted to start a business in America or anywhere in the country, what the hell does it take, right? It doesn't take a little bit of like magic sprinkles and like people. If you're opening a restaurant, it's not like you can just be like, oh, I open a restaurant. Like, why isn't my thing full? And why am I not just profiting money all over the place?
Well, you
like,
can open a restaurant without seed capital. And I think that's a mistake that most people in the real estate business make. I inspired a lot of careers prior to Market Maker because they would just see little me bopping around. They'd be like, man, if this kid can do that, you know what I mean? Like I sold several people houses that got licenses. And you know, I always liked a couple of stories. One was Master P. Master P, the story was that he had 10 grand, and that's how he started his record label that ended up being worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So in my mind, I was like, okay, I can start a business with 10 grand because that's what he did. There's another story that I also like, which is about the founder of Nebraska Furniture Mart. Her name was Rose Blumkin. I met her several times. She had this little cart, you know, I mean, she was like 90 something years old, and you'd have to get out of the way when she's coming down, you know what I mean? She'll run your butt over, especially when you're a kid. Get out of my way, kid. I got work to do. But the story with her was she started her you know, dynasty of NFM, Nebraska Furniture Mart, which she eventually sold to Berkshire Hathaway, in her garage, selling her own furniture, right? And so people will hear these kind of stories and they're like, okay, well, you know, you can do it with nothing, rub two sticks together. But they don't know the trials and tribulations. They don't know, you know, what she had to do, how she didn't spend that money, how she constantly reinvested it, right, to get the capital up to be able to grow the business. And I think that that's probably one of the things that drives you the most nuts when we were talking about this topic. You're like, people still don't even have a separate checking account for their business, right? And so how are you going to keep track? Treat it all like it's your money, and when you get a commission check, you're like, woohoo, I'm going to buy X. Like you there's a difference between milking the cow and having a barbecue. You're essentially having a barbecue, right? Every time you get a chunk, every time you get a cow, right? It's like, oh, I got a commission, I'm just going to burn this thing up because I can go get another one. That's a mistake. You're not going to grow your business like that.
And like the most amount of franchises that I know about, at least in the restaurant world, right, is Subway, right? You know how much it costs to start a Subway?
Huh.
Like on average about 250 to 300. Franchise fee is only 15 grand, right? 15 grand plus 12.5% of receipts minus sales tax.
Yeah, I looked into Subway with a family member. They generally net about 35 grand per store, which is crazy. But
unless you want to be the manager, then
right.
You can net some more, maybe 70, right? But $35,000. So if I was going to invest $300,000 to make 35 a year, and it's Subway, so it's probably a pretty solid 35 a year. At 10 years, right?
You get your money back.
I've made 50 grand.
Or 50.
A ton of exposure, right? Unless I can make it work a little bit better or whatever it may be. But there's like hundreds of thousands of Subways in the world, right? Yeah. So why are they able to sell that? Because it's an investment and people understand that eventually they're going to break even and then it'll be pure profit, right? Right? Yeah. Like, yeah. What does a rental house cost? Why? How long does it take to break even? How long does it start to net you money, right? Like all of these things are things that take investment, which is either a ton of money or a combination of a lot of money and a lot of work or a ridiculous amount of work, right? Like you can't grow anything that you're trying to make money off of any other unless you win the lottery.
The thing I was always brought up with, it was easy, everybody to do it, right? Like that's the truth. And so, you know, everybody gets into this business thinking it's easy, right? Because everybody does try to sell real estate, but the things that separate the pack, right, are these fundamentals, right? The people, what is it? It's like 20% make 80% of the money, and remaining 80% make 20% of the money, right? It's the old 80-20 rule. Why those 20% make 80% of the money? Well, they practice a few things and they've learned a few things that the other people haven't and won't, right? And in a big one, Jake, in my opinion, a huge driver of any success that I've ever had in business and life is just delayed gratification, right? Like I know what's coming, I know what's coming, I know what's coming, and guess what? If it don't come, then I change the strategy. Then I know it's coming, I know it's coming. I'm like the eternal optimist, right? Like I believe. And especially if I know somebody else is doing it. I think that's one of the driving factors for me of you know, if I always remember the saying from the movie, you know, how does it go? Essentially, if one man can do it, I can do it too, right? Right. Well, one man can do it, another can do. You know, it was a movie where he's killing the bear. What's his name? Right. But you know, I mean, maybe not always, but look, I can get close. You know what I mean? I don't. If I just get close, I'll be really successful, right? If I'm copying and modeling somebody who's doing a lot more than I am, and you know, I think. Essentially, when we go to model or look at what to implement in our business or what to to copy essentially or borrow inspiration from. We look in our own market. So we look in this little circle of each other, right? And I always say it's very incestuous business, right? Like we copy the people who we can see. I mean, maybe we'll go out to the neighboring town, you know, and the things that we look at aren't the things to copy, because the things that we see on the outside are the things that maybe aren't even having an impact on that agent's business. And you don't know, you know, unless you try. When you try, then you find out, oh, well, that really didn't make an impact at all. You know, from this type of a market scenario, for example, you know, I'm a little concerned about people who are really heavily focused on the buy side right now. You know, I mean, it's very hard to find inventory. If you have a really heavy buyer-based model, you should be feverishly looking to switch that up right now. You know what I mean? And at least make it a 50-50, so you got multiple pillars there, and you're not, you know, dependent on that one. Which, especially if you've got a big team and you're running a bunch of buyers agents, you know, they're getting frustrated. They're thinking about probably previous careers. You know, I mean, that's what happened during the recession. Before I knew it, like, you know, they were back to whatever they were doing before. And sometimes it wasn't very, you know, fitting for them. It was they'd grown so much. It was like, man, I just can't even see you doing that anymore. But, you know, man's got to do what a man's got to do. Woman's got to do what a woman's got to do. You know, and what happens sometimes when the constraint gets too much is you just kind of shrink back, right? In this market, you need to have systems in place for being in front of customers, being in front of your target audience, right? Whatever your ideal client profile is, which at this point should be people who are looking to sell their home just as much as it is people looking to buy their home. And you need to have systems in place to follow up those people. You need to have systems in place to make them promises. You need to have systems in place to consistently bring you opportunities, right? That you're not out there. I mean, I got a solicitation email the other day, and this guy was advertising a webinar for his Dynamite Expired program. And I was like, I mean, are there even expired? You know, is that even going to be helpful right now? I mean, you know, yeah.
And circling back with the delayed gratification and the confidence in knowing and who you're trusting, right? Or your own personal experiences, right? So like,
I invest in myself with the information that I want to have, right? I go and find the people who are doing what I want to do, and then I invest in myself as far as knowledge. Nobody can take it away from me at that point.
Nope. And once you have it, right? Like in your real estate business, it didn't matter what lead source it was. It didn't matter where anything was happening. Like you can't make, like Ryan, for example, right? You guys have very similar career paths and stuff too, which is cool. But I saw a post that John, his guy that essentially runs his team now, he posted yesterday of their numbers so far this year. Right?
Nice.
So pretty solid start to the year. Like not quite 4 months in.
Yeah.
99 closed, 58 pending. Right. And so like with us, like Ryan probably didn't know exactly what had come when he came on board with us. He probably didn't know exactly what had came with us 6 months in. But like when we got 12 months in, he was reviewing his numbers. That's when he was diving in. He was like, "Yeah, it looks like we closed, you know, like 30 something deals and essentially like 10x the investment." Right.
Why is that? It's because he has systems in place to do that. And that's the thing that most agents are missing, right? Everybody wants to be rich and thin and famous. Nobody wants to put in the work, right? That's what Kevin Hart always says. Everybody wants to just show up and have success, but it's when you do it and you learn it, right? You can look outwardly and be a critic of a competitor, but when you actually go through those trials and tribulations, you become humble very quickly, and you have a lot more respect, right, for the people that you're working with that have done that in your market. You know, sometimes you're falling right down their footsteps. Sometimes you're parallel to them, you know what I mean? Maybe you got a new path. I think, and I've said this before, you know, and that's kind of off topic, but the biggest mistake that I ever made was to stop learning and stop innovating, because I felt like I had so much to implement. I was like, man, I just need to go put in the work and scale this business. But guess what? That made me stagnant in my business, you know? it was a mistake. I didn't know everything. And what works today is not what will work tomorrow, right? That's the old Augmentino, greatest salesman in the world quote, right? Experience is regarded by those who not wisely but speak foolishly, because what works today is not what will work tomorrow. And that's what happened to me. What was working yesterday stopped working, right? And if you're in that position right now, I would invite you to roll up your sleeves and start researching how you can change the outcome in your business. Because guess what? There's still a lot of business out there. It's a hot real estate market. It's just you might have to change up strategies, change up tactics a little bit. And if you don't have a system to be able to, change these pieces out, it's going to be very difficult, because you're not going to really, it's kind of like a Marine versus a Girl Scout, right? In a fight. Girl Scout will be falling around everywhere. I've said this to you before, right? Marine's going to be right to the point and very impactful. And so, from a marketing perspective, that's what I always, intend to do is just be right to the ideal customer that I want to service every time.
Yep.
I want to communicate with them.
And if I'm going into battle, right, and I got people to choose to go into battle with, right, and I got somebody that's like, I don't care what's going to happen tomorrow. Let's just focus on the front and just worry about that, right? Like, they would be the worst war tactician in the history of like strategic minds that got destroyed in a day, right? Because they only thought about today, and then the other person was like, okay, like they have no plan for tomorrow, so let's just wait out today, and then they're done tomorrow, right? So you have to widen your lens and have that strategy that is encompassing, right? Like that's the beauty. That's what I always really enjoy talking to the people that have that, of like, hey, listen, I'm stacking my database. I understand that I can fight over the now business right now, but guess what? I'm going to need listings 3 months from now. I'm going to need listings 6 months from now. I'm going to need listings next year. I'm going to need listings in 5 years. So I might want to have some strategy, because like Ryan, when he came on board with us, if you looked at the first 6 months, the return would have been like, okay, right? But then that return probably tripled in the second 6 months, because there's critical mass that starts happening when you're consistently doing the right things, right? Like it builds. And then you look back and you're like, holy shit, this is pretty amazing, right? And that's how people get to the point where they sell hundreds of homes a year is establishing
that watermark and knowing what to expect. And it takes time to do that. And once you got it, now you got a formula. You got a success system that doesn't fail unless you don't follow the system. And that's how you multiply yourself through others. That's how you scale a business. And that's how you're able to become really, the CEO in charge of your business and running the business instead of the business running you. And that's a much better feeling to have. I don't think there's an agent out there that doesn't, unless they've already done it, desire to get out of the business at some point, like as far as working in the business, right? To be able to pull themselves out of the production. And, there are exceptions. I did meet a guy down at the beach. He sold his giant real estate, franchise. And he's like, no, I just kind of beat around the beach. He's like, it's really great. I don't have to manage nobody. I don't have to do nothing. And I sell a few homes a year, I'm happy. And I was like, oh. So
he does that because he can, right? He doesn't ever want to be in a position where he has to.
Right. But for me, the only way to ever have the possibility of that, which by the way, this makes it sellable as well, because now it's not you dependent, is to create these systems in place, create these watermarks, and the ability for your agents, your people to follow the system. It's the same with a listing coordinator, a closing coordinator, right? Like all of those things should be totally systemized so that you can control quality and make sure that no matter what price range they're in, they're getting the same experience every time. And that is fundamentally missing from the industry, tragically, because you can go to any franchise, and we've said this before, it's just going to be dependent on the agent, right? There is no consistency in the business, but for your business, there should be consistency. There should be a series of events that happen for every single listing. There should be a series of events that happen for every single contract that's under contract. There should be a series of events for everybody that comes into your database, right? It's called the customer journey, and you should be obsessing over that and how to improve that, because if you obsess over that, that's essentially your product, the customer experience, right? Everybody can sell real estate if they have a license. What's the core offer? What makes you different? What is the experience that they have that makes it different in working with you? And one of the things for me is I would just simply say you can hire my whole team for the price of a single agent, and then I go over all the different categories. And if I were using Market Maker, they would be in that category as well. Well, we also have this team that does this and this and this, and they're generating leads for us. They're running all our website traffic. They're following up with the leads on our behalf, and here's how many leads I got in this price range in this market. Who would you rather do business with? Somebody with all the leads already, or somebody who says that they're going to find one, right? Like, well, I've got a potential buyer, like that one potential buyer every agent in the listing appointment alludes to, right? And I would always ask them, like, hey, what did the last agent say? You know what I mean? When we were interviewing, they say they have a buyer. Yeah. Was it one buyer? Yeah. Isn't that interesting, right? I mean, I would just lead them down that path, and they do the same thing. They have a little chuckle. I had commercial property in town I was selling, and I interviewed some commercial agents, and I was just astounded. They didn't have a presentation. They didn't tell me what they were going to do. They didn't tell me how they were going to do it. And one of them had an elusive buyer. And I was like, well, who's that? She's like, oh, it's these people. I'm like, oh, well, I've already been talking to them, I'll continue to talk to them. And anyway, I'm just going to get off before I get myself in trouble here. But systems for conversion, systems for presentations. So when you get in front of a seller, like how you're going to service them, right? It should be all about them, all of it, not about you. Right.
And that's the power of the network too, is because as you grow, you just stumble into a new set of problems, right? Problems don't go away. There's change, right? And they sometimes the impact is way bigger, right? As you're getting bigger, that little change can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in profit swing, and a lot of
first implemented the transaction fee. There you go. Boom. So I ran into the guy a decade later at an event, and I was like, man, I got to buy you a beer. Another 50,000 on every 100 transactions.
Right.
What I mean?
But that kind of thing is the circle, right? And the network that you hang out with and the people you hang out with, because they can help the people, especially that have been where you're trying to go, or at least are in that same fight at a minimum, right? That are trying to do that, rather than the people telling you, oh, that's not possible. Oh, I've been doing this for 20 years and I've never sold that many houses. They must have this excuse, right? External. Like, you can't surround yourself with those. You got to surround yourself with the people that are like-minded and also might seem crazy to everybody else, but to this group is normal. Of whatever you want to accomplish with your real estate business, you can, right? You're a little decision away from being able to make the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. And it's just a matter of putting one foot in front of the other and making it happen.
Yeah, and let me just expand on that, because again, lack of prioritization for agents, right? What you should be studying, what you should be learning, what you should be implementing should be the closest problem to you, right? I had a guy, he said the closest alligator in the boat, right? And that should be it. So if you don't have leads, you should be generating leads. If you're generating leads, but you're not converting them, right? You need to work on converting them. If you're generating leads, you're getting face-to-face, you're converting them into customers, but then you're not selling them, right? You need to work on some sales skills and some sales tactics. You know what I mean? There's a lot of good trainers out there. Just the real quick down and dirty that I learned was don't stand in the middle of the room. You know what I mean? The room looks bigger without your big body in the middle of it. Ask them what they would do with this part of the property, what they would do with this part of the house, And then my favorite is, asking if I felt like they liked it, if I could step outside and make a phone call so they could talk about it amongst themselves. Right?
Wait. You're saying that there's things that you could learn that help in each part of the process?
Yes, and that's what you should be studying. It's no fun to learn just for the sake of learning. You know what I mean? Like, that's just boring. That's super boring. But to learn because it's going to have an impact and an outcome that you can implement right away that's going to get you more money, that's very exciting. That's what I like to learn. That's what I like to study. I don't like to study anything other than that. And it has to be situational, right? What is the biggest problem in my business right now? I can tell you what yours is. It's probably inventory. So you should probably be studying that and how to get more listings. And if you want some help with that, go to marketmakercall.com and we can help you if your area is available. Check it out, marketmakercall.com. I don't know where we're at on time because we started late, but let's wrap it up, brother.
We're at 35. So as we always say here at Market Maker, you are always just one pre-position appointment away.
Every day.
Get it.
Right on.